Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta. You're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's start with a check of the top headlines this hour. US President Donald Trump threatens escalating tariffs on key European allies unless the US is allowed to buy Greenland. Duties would start at 10% on February 1 and rise to 25% by June. European leaders rejected the demand, warning it would damage NATO unity, derail trade deals, and deepen transatlantic tension. Syrian government forces advanced into Kurdish-held areas near the Euphrates, taking Tabqa and key dams despite US calls to stop. Kurdish-led SDF accused the army of violating a withdrawal deal and warned it would fight to hold remaining towns and oil fields. European Union and Mercosur leaders have signed the landmark free trade agreement in Paraguay with 25 years of negotiations, paving the way for what would become the European Union's largest ever trade deal. The accord covers the European Union with Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay, but still requires approval from the European Parliament. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei accused Trump of fueling deadly protests that killed over 3,000 people. Khamenei called Trump a criminal, while Iran blamed the unrest on US and Israeli interference amid mass arrests and internet shutdowns. According to IMF statements, the International Monetary Fund has approved a $261 million disbursement for Ethiopia after completing the fourth review of its 48-month extended credit facility, bringing total IMF support under the program to just over $2.18 billion. New York City Mayor Mamdani has appointed Tricia Shimomura as the city's new Parks Department Commissioner, tasking her with managing more than 30,000 acres of land. Mamdani praised Shimomura's decade-long record of public service, while Shimomura called the role an honor and vowed to make a difference. According to a Department of Justice letter filed with Judge Paul Engelmeyer, the U.S. Justice Department has urged a New York federal judge to reject lawmakers Ro Khanna and Thomas Massey's push for a special master to oversee the release of Jeffrey Epstein-related files. Syria's Communications Minister Abdul Salman Haikal said internet users can now access the Google Play Store without a VPN and that most Google services are expected to return to Syria soon. The restoration follows the removal of Syria from US Treasury's OFAC sanctions list last year. All right, viewers, let's start with top focus now on US tariffs on Greenland and European leaders. European leaders are in fact voicing strong opposition to Trump's threat of tariffs on European allies over Greenland. This comes as Trump announced a 10% tariff on goods from Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Finland, and Great Britain, effective from February 1. France's President Emmanuel Macron has urged the European Union to activate its anti-coercion instrument, a powerful trade measure if Trump moves forward with his plan. Meanwhile, Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni called the tariff threat a mistake, adding that she directly told Trump her views. Let's listen in.
Volevo dirvi che la previsione di un aumento dei dazi nei confronti di quelle nazioni che hanno scelto di contribuire alla sicurezza della Groenlandia, secondo me è un errore e ovviamente non la condivido. Condivido l'attenzione che la presidenza americana attribuisce, come vi ho detto molte volte, alla Groenlandia e in generale all'Artico, che è una zona strategica su cui sto lavorando. Ho sentito sia Donald Trump qualche ora fa, al quale ho detto quello che penso, e ho sentito il segretario generale della NATO che mi conferma un lavoro che la NATO sta iniziando a fare da questo punto di vista. Chiaramente nel corso della giornata sentirò anche i leader europei, è convocata credo una riunione a livello per ora di Coreper dell'Unione Europea, ma io credo che in questa fase sia molto importante parlarsi e che sia molto importante evitare una escalation, perché si può lavorare insieme per raggiungere un obiettivo che è utile e necessario per tutti.
Meanwhile, Poland's foreign minister Sikorski also weighed in, emphasizing that tariffs can only target the European Union as a whole, not individual countries. United Kingdom's Culture Minister Lisa Nandy called the decision completely wrong, highlighting that working together on Arctic security is critical for Europe and the US. Trump has long insisted on full ownership of Greenland, citing its strategic importance and mineral resources. However, both Denmark and Greenland have made it clear that the island is not for sale, and the people of Greenland do not want to join the US. I welcome now Jayajit Bhattacharya, who is an economist and finance expert from New Delhi in this discussion. Thanks very much, Mr. Bhattacharya, for joining me. Firstly, if like Macron warns of the European Union invoking the anti-coercion instrument, what does that really mean for US?
Well, let's look at the details of the anti-coercion instrument. It's as per Regulation 2023 by 2675 that gives the European Union tools to counter economic coercion by third countries. And the mechanism includes deterring them from using trade or investment measures to pressure the EU or its member states into changing sovereign policy. It's almost like terrorism in a manner, because terrorism, as definition in UN, pretty much says the same, that it should not force the sovereign policy from being changed. And that's what the anti-coercion instrument is. But, if you look at the details of it, it essentially goes into a couple of steps where it says, let's have a dialogue, let's have a conversation. And if everything else fails, then we will put some trade measures. However, in this particular case, the US is the larger economy. It's a $33 trillion economy, whereas the Europe is hardly $23 trillion economy. So it's trying to put trade responses against a much larger economy, and therefore it's, I think, quite questionable as to how effective the anti-coercion instrument will be in this particular case, and hence Europe needs to look at other mechanisms to safeguard what they believe is their interest.
All right. I also want to discuss the statement that's come out from a Polish foreign minister, who says that the tariff should be imposed on European Union as a bloc and not on individual nations. How do you see that statement from Poland, and what's the background really that has invoked this?
So, as has always been the case with big powers in the human history, is that they would not pick up a large bloc. They would try and divide and rule, which is what has happened through the colonial phase also. And that's what is getting repeated in this particular case. The 10% tariff that is being invoked by the Europe, or invoked by US or threatened by US, is essentially on only a few countries in Europe and not the entire EU. It's threatened on Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, Netherlands, and so on, Finland, UK, but not the entire EU. And therefore, the point is that, we will not allow a larger power to divide and rule EU. And therefore, what the Polish Prime Minister, Mr. Sikorski, is basically saying is that any duty on any particular country will be on the entire EU. And therefore, let the EU stand united in this particular case. One can't pick and choose specific countries and apply tariffs on only specific countries, because also, as per the rules of origin, you cannot determine where the goods have come from. It's come from Europe. You can't divide it further by saying it's coming from France or Germany. And hence, even on a procedural level, it's quite challenging to put tariffs on individual countries and not entire EU. And that's basically what the Polish Prime Minister is saying.
But Poland is not even one of the countries that Trump has threatened tariffs on. So is he inviting tariffs onto himself and other European Union countries just so the European Union countries all come together against Trump?
That it reminds me of when the Nazi Germany was picking on its neighboring countries one by one, and Poland was one of the first ones. The point that really the Prime Minister of Poland is saying is that if Europe doesn't stand united, doesn't matter if Poland is excluded in terms of tariffs, it's just a matter of time that Poland will also fall. Just like in World War II, Poland fell first, and then the rest of Europe started falling to the Nazi Germany. And basically, that's what he's saying. Also, as I mentioned, procedurally, uh, it is very difficult to say what good has come from Germany and what goods have come from Poland. And the European economy is really very, very interlocked. So even if, as per the statement, there is no direct tariff on Poland, they will get impacted because goods supplied to them is going to Germany, which is then going to France and then getting assembled and then getting exported to US. So if that good gets impacted by tariff, then the Polish economy also gets impacted.
Okay, sure. Thanks for that explanation to our viewers. But do stay on as we move. Viewers, let's also tell you that US House Speaker Mike Johnson has said that he does not foresee military intervention in Greenland, emphasizing that diplomacy is the preferred approach. Speaking to an English media, he added that Greenland's strategic location makes it important not only to the US but to all freedom-loving people elsewhere, citing its historical significance dating back to President Truman. The comments come after former President after Trump threatened tariffs on imports from 8 European countries sending troops to Greenland. Trump has previously said Greenland is critical to US security and has not ruled out taking control by force. Request Mr. Bhattacharya to join me back in the discussion now. What do you think are the options that Trump is most likely to explore? Of course, tariffs is one, but other than that, to acquire Greenland as he so wishes without really alienating these countries and tampering with the transatlantic alliance and fostering a trade war?
So I don't think it's that the Trump administration in the US is concerned about alienation of the Europeans or walking out of the transatlantic alliance per se, as per what we have seen of their policies, and therefore it's also quite complex to understand what does Mike Johnson mean when he says that freedom-loving countries would like to have Greenland enslaved. So it's a bit contradictory and difficult to understand in the geopolitical context, and also when he says that he does not foresee military intervention and prefers diplomacy. We haven't seen that in the past, and what we have seen is that it's very difficult to actually rely on the statements coming from the US administration in the last year or so, because they seem to be contradictory, and they're also contradictory to what actually the subsequent steps taken by the administration. We have seen that in terms of their conflict with Iran, where they said they're not going to bomb Iran and then promptly came back a few weeks later and bombed Iran. We have seen what happened with Venezuela. If they want something, they will go get it, in spite of whatever the global rule of law is, whatever the international regulations are. And therefore, to your question that what will the US administration do as a next step, well, we have seen that whatever the administration wants, they've got it in the past. And as an individual, the President of the United States has also got what he wanted in his lifetime. And therefore, one way or the other, they will seem to be reaching out for Greenland. Now, what is the effect of that and what will be the fallout is a different story altogether. Will they make an all-out effort to get Greenland? The answer is absolutely yes. The rationale for getting it, which is that Greenland is strategically important and has got a lot of minerals, well, that holds true for half of the world. India is strategically important, has got minerals. Tibet is strategically important and has got minerals, and so on and so forth. So will the US go ahead and take control of the rest of the world is really the next question after Greenland.
All right, sure. Mr. Bhattacharya, thanks very much then for joining me in this discussion. It was a pleasure to have you. Viewers, moving ahead now. A draft charter sent to about 60 countries by the US administration outlines strict requirements for membership in the Board of Peace. Under the new terms, countries wishing to remain members for more than 3 years must contribute a minimum of $1 billion in cash funds. According to the document, members will serve a term of no more than 3 years unless renewed by the chairman. However, countries that contribute more than $1 billion within the first year of the Charter's implementation will be exempt from the 3-year limit. This proposal raises questions about the role of financial influence in international peacekeeping initiatives and could impact the composition of the new body. Yossi Kapurwasser, who is Israeli intelligence and security expert from Tel Aviv, joins me in this discussion. All right, viewers, before we have our guests join us, let's give you some more details. The draft charter is sent to 16 countries by the US administration, and it provides some requirements for the membership of the Board of Peace. Countries that wish to remain members may need to contribute $1 billion in cash funds. According to this document, members will serve a term of not more than 3 years unless it's renewed by the chairman, and the countries that contribute more than $1 billion within the first year of the Charter's implementation will be exempt from the 3-year limit. Now, the proposal, of course, has raised doubts and concerns and questions about the role of financial influence in international peacekeeping initiatives and how it could impact the composition of the new body. Viewers, let's also tell you that as the plan to end the Gaza conflict enters its second phase, the White House had released the names of the members who will be part of the senior executive board that will be working with Trump's new Board of Peace. Yossi Kapurwasser is now ready to join us in the discussion. Mr. Kapurwasser, thank you very much for joining us. Firstly, take us through whether these claims are really legitimate, if Trump's really asking for $1 billion for each member country to join the board, if there are terms to this. How true are these reports?
Well, some of the would-be members of this board are extremely rich, and Trump didn't hide his intention to build on their capabilities in order to finance the rebuilding of Gaza and turning it into a prosperous area. And I believe it means mainly the Gulf states, and this is the core of the expectations of financing for the new Gaza. And I don't mean, for example, he approached also Jordan. I don't believe Jordan is supposed to pay $1 billion for its participation of that. But Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, of course, are expected to give maybe even more than $1 billion.
Okay, sure. What does that then talk about the financial influence that some of these people coming from the richer nations, mightier nations, have on international peacekeeping boards like these?
Well, I think that for President Trump, this is going to focus on Gaza, but it's a model for dealing with other problems as well. And if this is going to materialize, then of course these donors are going to ask for some impact on what's going to happen on the ground. That's why Israel is so worried about the possibility that Qatar is going to be involved, because we know that from the past, the involvement of Qatar led to the strengthening of Hamas to the point that it was able to carry out the 7th of October attack. We want to make sure that the money coming in will be spent only on economic issues and not used in order to rebuild the capabilities of Hamas militarily. That's clear. On other places, Trump may believe that this is going to be a nice way to raise funds for good purposes and promoting peace in places like Ukraine and elsewhere.
All right, sure. And how do you react to the allegations that there's no woman, no Palestinian in the board, and also the fact that Israel has also spoken out against, more Americans in the board?
No, and we're not supposed to be any Palestinians in this board. In the Board of Peace, no Palestinians. There is the
other
technocratic
executive
government.
board. to govern
And
Gaza.
these boards, they were not supposed to be Palestinians. These are international boards that were not supposed to include Palestinians. If we start putting Palestinians, this is going to cause a lot of trouble because Palestinians cannot agree within themselves about who represents them. So we'll keep the Palestinians, let's keep the Palestinians out of it and let the Palestinians run the daily life of Gaza. This is what the technocratic government is supposed to do, and it was formed simultaneously. Their business is to run the daily life of Gaza, make sure that the people of Gaza enjoy better life.
All right, sure, Mr. Kapawasa, thank you for your comments. I request you to stay on as we move. Viewers, U.S. envoy Tom Barrack has visited Erbil in northern Iraq to meet with both Syrian Democratic Forces Commander General Mazloum Abdi and Iraqi Kurdish leader Masoud Barzani, aiming to mediate an end to the conflict between SDF and Syrian army troops in neighboring Syria. The latest violence in Syria has worsened the divide between President Ahmed Shara's government, which is committed to reuniting the country after 14 years of war, and the local Kurdish authorities are suspicious of his Islamist-led administration. Syrian troops clashing with US-backed Kurdish-led forces captured the Omar oil field, the largest in the country, along with the Konoko gas field in eastern Deir Zone province, as allied Arab tribal forces advanced in the oil-rich area near the Iraqi border. Yossi Kapawasar continues to stay with us. I invite him to join me back in the discussion with his first comments on this.
Well, I think that what we're seeing as we speak is the fall of the Kurdish controlled region in northern Syria to the hands of Shara forces. And this is a very problematic development for the Kurds, most of all, but also for the relationship of the United States with the Kurds. The United States had a very strong and close relationship with the Kurds. And now, under the leadership of Tom Barrack, they actually support or don't do anything to interfere with the efforts of the Turks, together with the Shara forces, to take away from the Kurds the main sources of income. They just took over some major oil fields in northeastern Syria that the Kurds used to use their production in order to finance their activities in their region called Rojava. And without this, it's going to be very difficult for the Kurds to maintain control of this area. They are under a state of threat as we speak, and there are rumors about attacks on the Kurds themselves, not only on the oil fields. It's a very tense situation now in northern Syria for the Kurds.
All right, Mr. Kapawasa, thanks very much for joining me in this discussion. And moving ahead, viewers, let's bring you some news from Portugal, where Portuguese voters headed to the polls Sunday to elect a new president, with opinion polls showing a tight race between three leading candidates, including far-right Chega Party leader André Ventura. A runoff is likely, marking only the second time since Portugal ended its fascist dictatorship in 1974 that a presidential election has required a second round. The presidency is largely ceremonial but holds powers like dissolving parliament or vetoing legislation. Around 11 million voters are eligible to cast ballots, with polls closing at 7 p.m. local time. Socialist Antonio José Seguro Ventura and liberal initiatives João Coutrim de Figueiredo are neck and neck, while 8 other candidates, including a retired admiral and centre-right backed Luis Marques Mendes, also remain in the race. Despite Ventura's strong showing, analysts say his high rejection rate could hinder his chances in a runoff. And as always, we'll end with some technology news coming in. Elon Musk is seeking up to $134 billion from OpenAI and Microsoft, claiming they benefited unfairly from his early support. In a federal court filing, Musk says OpenAI gained as much as $109 billion, while Microsoft gained up to $25 billion, tied to his role as a co-founder and early backer. Musk says he provided most of the seed funding, key contacts, and credibility. OpenAI calls the demand unserious and part of a harassment campaign. Microsoft denies any wrongdoing. A jury trial is set to begin in April in California. And that's all we have time for. Thanks for watching NewsX World. For more news updates from around the world.